It was a cold spring morning. In a small town near the sea, an old man named Walter stood in his kitchen, drinking tea. His hands were slow, and his back a little bent. But in his eyes, there was still fire. Walter had just retired. For 42 years, he worked in a factory that made shoes. He was a quiet man. Every morning, he walked the same road, wore the same coat, and said the same words, "Good morning." Now, the road was empty. No more factory. No more shoes. The first few days of retirement were strange. He woke up early like always. He made tea. He read the newspaper. Then, nothing. Hours passed like clouds. Too slow. One afternoon, Walter went to the attic. He found an old box. Inside were photos from when he was young, pictures of places he never went. Paris. Rome. London. He touched one picture. It was a red double-decker bus in London. Behind it, Big Ben. His dream. That was the place he always wanted to visit. But he never had time. Until now. He smiled. Maybe it's not too late, he said to himself. But Walter had a problem. He did not speak English. He had never studied it. Never needed it. In his town, people spoke only their native language. But if he wanted to go to London, he needed English. Just a little. The next morning, Walter went to the library. "I want to learn English," he told the librarian. She smiled and gave him a book, English for Beginners. He opened the book. "Hello. My name is," the words looked like small puzzles. Strange but beautiful. He liked the sound of the words in his head. Every day, he studied. 1 hour. Then 2. Then more. He wrote words in a notebook. He listened to audio lessons. He watched movies with subtitles. He did not understand much at first, but he kept going. After 2 months, he could say simple sentences. "My name is Walter. I live in a small town. I want tea, please." He felt proud. Like a boy again. One day, he practiced English at a cafe. A young man at the next table smiled and said, "Your English is good." Walter laughed. "Not good," he said. "But I try." The man said, "That's the best way. Try and keep going." That night, Walter bought a plane ticket. London. His hands shook when he clicked, "Buy now." It felt like jumping off a mountain. But in a good way. On the day of his flight, he packed his coat, his notebook, and a book called Easy English Dialogues. His suitcase was small. His heart was full. At the airport, he used his English for the first time. "1 coffee, please." The woman smiled. "Milk and sugar?" "Yes, both," he said. His voice was nervous. But he did it. When the plane took off, Walter looked out the window. The clouds were soft. The sky was wide. He thought, "I'm really doing this." The flight was long. He listened to English stories with his headphones. He looked at his notes. He even slept a little. When he arrived in London, it was raining. He took a taxi. The driver was fast and talked a lot. Walter understood some words. Traffic, bridge, crazy weather. He nodded and smiled. The city was loud and full of life. Cars. People. Lights. He checked into a small hotel. The woman at the desk said, "Welcome to London." He answered, "Thank you. I'm happy to be here." She smiled. "That's nice to hear." The next day, Walter walked for hours. He saw the red buses, the big clock tower, the parks with green grass and white flowers. His feet hurt, but he was happy. In the afternoon, he sat in a quiet park. He opened his book and started to read. A woman sat on the same bench. She was reading too. Her hair was gray. She wore a soft blue coat. Her face was calm. She looked at Walter and smiled. "Nice day," she said. Walter froze. Then he smiled back. "Yes. Nice and quiet." His words were slow, but clear. The woman closed her book. "You're not from here, are you?" Walter laughed. "No. I'm from a small town. First time in London." "Same for me," she said. I'm from Canada. My name is Margaret. Walter held out his hand. Walter. Nice to meet you. They talked for an hour. Then too. They shared stories. He told her about his shoes. She told him about her garden. They both loved old music, good tea, and simple things. When they said goodbye, Margaret said, "Same time tomorrow?" Walter smiled. "Yes. I would like that." He walked back to his hotel slowly, the city buzzing around him. But inside, he was quiet. Peaceful. That night, he didn't open his English book. He didn't need to. He just sat by the window, looked out at the street, and whispered one word, tomorrow. The next morning, Walter woke up before the sun. He was excited, like a boy before the first day of school. He wore his best sweater, combed his hair carefully, and even used a little cologne he hadn't touched in years. He arrived at the park early. The bench was empty. A bird sat on the backrest and flew away when he got close. Walter sat down, holding a small paper bag with 2 warm croissants. The sky was cloudy, but bright. 15 minutes later, he saw her. Margaret walked slowly, holding a small book in her hand. She smiled as soon as she saw him. "Hello, Walter." "Good morning, Margaret. I brought something. For breakfast." She sat beside him. "Thank you. That's very kind." She opened the bag and laughed. "Croissants. You read my mind." They ate together, speaking between bites. Walter was careful with his English, but the words came easier now. With Margaret, he didn't feel afraid to make mistakes. They talked about travel, music, and childhood. Walter learned she had worked as a school librarian. She had retired last year, like him. Her husband had passed away 5 years ago. She had no children. She lived alone. "I was afraid to travel alone," she said. "But I decided I had waited long enough." "Me too," Walter said. "We're brave," he added, and they both laughed. After breakfast, they walked through Hyde Park. The grass was soft from rain, and the trees stood tall around them. They watched ducks in the pond, and an artist painting near the path. Walter took a deep breath. "London is big," he said. "But I don't feel lost." "Not now." Margaret looked at him. "Me neither." They spent the day exploring. They went to a small museum and had tea in a quiet cafe. Walter practiced his English every moment. Sometimes he asked her for help. "How do you say this?" he'd ask, pointing. She would smile and say the word slowly. He repeated it. "You're learning fast," she said. "Because I have a good teacher," he said. And she smiled again. At the end of the day, they took the bus together. When it was time to say goodbye, Margaret touched his hand lightly. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Same time." Walter couldn't sleep that night. His room felt warm, even though the heater was off. He walked to the window and looked at the lights outside. He felt something in his chest, something quiet and big. He hadn't felt it in years. The next day was sunny. They met at the same bench. This time, Margaret brought the food, 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper, and a small thermos of hot tea. They sat and ate and talked. Hours passed like minutes. After lunch, they visited a bookshop. Walter walked slowly between the shelves, his finger touching the spines. "Too many books," he said. "Not enough time." Margaret picked up a small book and handed it to him. It was titled English for Travelers. "This one," she said, "might help you talk your way through Italy next." Walter looked at her. "Italy?" She smiled. "If we're going to keep meeting, we might as well make a plan." He took the book. "A good plan," he said. They walked to the Thames and watched the boats. A musician played soft guitar music near the bridge. Walter and Margaret stood still for a while, just listening. Then she said, "You know, I didn't come to London looking for anyone." "Me neither," Walter said. She looked at him. "But I'm glad I found you." He wanted to say more, something perfect. But his English failed him. So he just took her hand. She didn't let go. The days went by fast. They met every morning. Some days they walked. Some days they took buses to places neither of them had ever seen. One day it rained hard, and they stayed in a cafe for hours, drinking tea and watching the people pass by. Walter tried new words every day. Margaret corrected him gently, and he always laughed when he got things wrong. On a quiet Thursday morning, Margaret looked at him seriously. "You know," she said, "my trip is ending soon." Walter looked down. "When?" "3 more days." He was silent. Then he said, "Mine too." They sat still for a moment. Then she said, "We don't have to stop this, Walter." He turned to her. "No." She shook her head. "We can meet again. Somewhere new. Or maybe," she looked at him with kind eyes, "maybe I visit you. In your town." He smiled. "I would like that. Very much." That evening, Walter went back to his hotel and wrote something in his notebook. Not a list of new words. Not a grammar rule. He wrote, "It is never too late to live. Or to love." Then he closed the book, turned off the light, and went to bed with a full heart. Walter woke early again. It was their second to last day in London. He had never liked goodbyes. He always thought they were cold, like a door slowly closing. But this one felt different. It was sad, yes, but also warm. Like something beautiful had happened, and would not end with a plane ticket. He and Margaret met as usual. This time, she wore a red scarf. "You look nice," Walter said. She touched the scarf. "I thought it might bring some color to our gray day." The sky was cloudy again. It smelled like rain, but no one cared. They walked through the streets near the river. Their steps were slow. They stopped often to look at old buildings, small shops, street artists, and smiling strangers. "Do you feel young again?" she asked. Walter smiled. "I feel new." That day, Margaret took him to her favorite garden in the city. It was behind a small church, quiet and full of flowers. The grass was short, the stone benches old and soft. They sat under a tree. Walter looked around. "I never thought I'd travel." "Why not?" "I thought dreams were only for young people." Margaret took his hand. "Dreams are for people who are still alive. You, Walter, are very much alive." He laughed. "Thank you, Doctor." They sat for a while without speaking. Walter looked at her hand in his. Her fingers were thin but strong. There was a light in her eyes, like morning sunlight in winter. She looked at him the same way. Finally, he spoke. "Will you really come to visit me?" "Yes. I will." Walter nodded. "I want to be ready when you come. I want to show you my town. My garden. My favorite bakery. I'd love that." He looked down. "Maybe by then, my English will be better." She leaned closer. "It's already perfect." That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window with a cup of tea and looked at the city lights. Cars passed, people walked, and somewhere far away, music played from a window. He thought about everything he had done in the last few weeks. Buying the ticket. Learning the words. Walking new streets. Meeting Margaret. And he thought, what if he had stayed home? What if he had said, "I'm too old," and done nothing? He would never have met her. Never felt this lightness in his chest. He made a choice then. A quiet promise. This would not end. The next morning, they met early. They walked to a small bridge. The river moved slowly under them. Margaret turned to him. "Tomorrow we both leave." "I know. But not forever." "No," he said. "Not forever." They stood in silence. Then she reached into her bag and gave him a small envelope. "Open it after I go," she said. "What is it?" "Just something small." He took the envelope and held it tight. Later, they had tea one last time in the cafe where they had hidden from the rain. They sat at their usual table. The waiter knew them now and brought tea without asking. Walter looked around. Everything felt familiar now. The sounds. The smells. The English. "I will miss this," he said. She nodded. "Me too." Then it was time. They walked together to the corner where their streets split. Walter said, "Do I say goodbye now?" Margaret smiled. No. You say, see you soon. See you soon, Margaret. See you soon, Walter. And then she kissed his cheek and turned away. He stood there a long time after she left. Then he walked back to his hotel, opened the envelope, and found a photo of them sitting on the park bench. On the back, she had written, "Dreams don't end when we wake up. Some dreams begin when we open our eyes." Walter came home just before sunset. The air in his small town was still, the streets quiet as always. A cat lay sleeping on the wall outside the bakery. The same bakery where he had bought his morning bread for years. But today, he didn't go inside. He stood in the middle of the street for a moment, holding his suitcase in one hand. The other hand was deep in his coat pocket, touching a small photo, Margaret's gift. Their photo on the park bench in London. He took it out, looked at it, and smiled. He had left as a man who made shoes. He returned as a man who had lived. A man who had found someone. The taxi driver helped him with the bags. "Home?" the man asked. Walter nodded. As the car moved through the narrow streets, memories followed him. The quiet evenings. The long walks alone. The nights spent with books and tea. And now, they were mixed with new memories. Margaret's voice. The smell of rain in London. Her laughter in the cafe. The way she said his name. Back in his kitchen, Walter made tea. The kettle whistled, steam rising like a sigh. He placed the photo by the window where the sun would find it every morning. The cup of tea in his hand felt warm. The silence felt soft, not heavy. The next day, he woke early, even though there was no reason to. His first thought was simple, write to her. He sat at the table, took out a clean sheet of paper, and wrote in his best handwriting. "Dear Margaret. I made it home safely. Everything looks the same here, but I don't feel the same. I've brought your voice back with me. It sits in every quiet corner of this house. I've brought your smile too, it hangs on the wall with our photo. You said something before we left, dreams begin when we open our eyes. I believe that now. You were my dream, Margaret. And now, I don't want to fall asleep again. Please come visit. My house is small, but my heart is open. I'm learning new English words every day. For you. For us. I'll be ready. With love. Walter." He walked to the post office and mailed the letter himself. His step was light. He felt younger, somehow. In the days that followed, Walter kept busy. He cleaned the guest room, sheets, curtains, a vase of fresh flowers. He painted the garden fence, something he had planned to do for 10 years. He bought 2 new cups for tea and placed them neatly on the kitchen shelf. And every day, he studied English. But now it wasn't just learning. It was preparing. He listened to audiobooks and repeated every sentence out loud, just like Margaret had told him. He read short stories, wrote down new words, and practiced them in the mirror. He watched videos online and whispered the phrases back to himself while watering the garden or washing the dishes. He also wrote letters to her. Many letters. But he sent only one. The others he kept in a drawer. Thoughts, hopes, memories, they were all there. Weeks passed. And then, one morning, a letter came. A real one. From Canada. With her handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. "Dear Walter. I read your letter 3 times before I could reply. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because it made my heart full. Yes, I'll come. I want to see your garden and your town. I want to walk those quiet streets and sit with you under your sky. I will arrive in 3 weeks. I'll wear the red scarf. You bring the tea. With all my heart. Margaret." Walter sat down, slowly, the letter still in his hand. He read it again, then again. His smile stayed for hours. 3 weeks. He wrote the number on a small calendar. Then he started preparing, not with stress, but with joy. He trimmed the hedges, fixed the broken gate, even cleaned the windows twice. He went to the market every morning and spoke English with the young woman at the vegetable stall. She laughed and helped him with new words. Every night, he sat in the living room, practicing sentences for when Margaret arrived. "Would you like some tea? This is my favorite place in town. You look beautiful." He practiced that last one most of all. Finally, the day came. The sun rose early. The sky was clear. He put on a clean shirt, combed his hair, and checked everything one last time. Then he picked up a small bouquet of wildflowers and walked to the station. He arrived early and waited on the wooden bench, heart beating like a boy's. He held the flowers tight. People came and went. He watched each one. Then he saw her. She stepped off the train slowly, looking around. She wore the red scarf, just as she had promised. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke at first. Then he walked to her, gently placed the flowers in her hands, and whispered, "Welcome." She smiled, touched his cheek, and said, "I'm home." They walked together through his town. She held his arm. They passed the bakery, the small park, the bookstore. She looked around with wide eyes. "It's quiet," she said. "But beautiful." He nodded. "Wait until you see the garden." At home, they sat in the garden under the tree. The same spot where he always sat with his tea. Only now, there were 2 cups. He poured the tea slowly. They drank, smiled, and didn't say much. Words were not needed. Everything was said in silence. Walter looked at her. "Do you remember when we first met? In the park. I was scared to speak. But you did." "Yes. And I haven't stopped since." Margaret took his hand. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, listening to the birds. The sun was warm on his face. The scent of flowers floated on the wind. For a moment, he forgot about time. He didn't think about age, or the past, or what might come. He just sat beside her. Alive. Awake. And ready for the next chapter. Together. Thank you for listening to this story. If you liked it, write about it in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories.